RP is not actually like a native accent. There's no city or region where you could go to where everybody speaks RP. Unless you're going for tea and biscuits regularly at Buckingham Palace with the Queen. Who are you trying to impress? Hi there guys, in today's video we're going to be answering the question, which English accent should I learn? My name's Rob and I'm an English teacher from Yorkshire, which is in the northeast of England, and here on METR we're all about helping Spanish speakers take their English from an intermediate to an advanced level. When you're in the process of doing that, taking your English to an advanced level, you're gonna find that you need to start gaining an understanding of different regional accents and different accents from different countries. So this is a very important question to start asking yourself. What's more, when you're sort of in the middle there, maybe like at an intermediate, upper intermediate level, you're also going to start to notice as you get into the upper reaches that you start to notice yourself some of the differences, regional differences between these accents where you might not have noticed them before. You know, it all kind of they're all kind of jumbled up, mixed together, and you didn't have a high enough level to be able to separate them. The other thing that's going on there is that the course books that you've used on your English courses up to that point will all have used probably some kind of standard accent, usually based on received pronunciation. Maybe you haven't had so much exposure to them, at least not deliberate exposure. During the process when we've been learning English, we've often picked up ideas or misconceptions sometimes about accents and which one might be the best English accent from our teachers, our colleagues, our friends, peers. If you're living in the Americas or if you're living in Spain, you will have been exposed to, you're likely to have been exposed to different varieties of English depending on where you're from. What we want to do today is have a look at our options and think a little bit about what's out there so we can actually decide what we want and what fits best with our objectives, rather than having that kind of thrust upon us by our situation or by the materials that we're using, right? Let's be a bit more decisive about it. So in the past, when I've asked somebody this question, what accent would you like to have? Like, which version of English would you like to learn? The most typical question I get back is something like, I want to sound like a native speaker, or I want to speak like they do on the BBC, or I want to speak the Queen's English, which on paper it seems to sound correct because it's kind of idealistic, right? I mean, who doesn't want to sound like a native speaker, right? But if we start thinking about that a little bit, the argument seems to fall apart, because just the idea of sounding like a native speaker, well, my first question there would be, which native speaker do you want to sound like? Because you could sound, just within thinking about countries, do you want to have an American accent? Do you want to have a British accent? Within individual countries, here in the UK for example, if you go 15 minutes in any one direction on the train, you're likely to find at least a slightly different accent, right? If you take a train from Manchester to Liverpool, you might be surprised to discover, oh, wait a minute, what's going on? This English isn't what they were speaking over there. It's quite different. Which native speaker do you want to sound like? Some of these accents you're also going to find that they will either be easier for you based on their features, and some of them will be more useful than others depending on what your objective is as an English speaker and the reasons and motivations which have led you to improve your English in the first place. It's not that learning to speak like a native speaker is in itself a bad thing. It's just that we want to be aware of what the implications are, like what does that actually mean to speak like a native speaker, and also we want to consider, is it necessary or practical for me to sound like a native speaker? And once we've considered those things, we can then make the decision to go ahead and do it, fully aware of what our options are. So the first accent option that I want to speak with you about today is RP, or received pronunciation, which is also known as the Queen's English sometimes, or it's what people think of when they think of the BBC. Received pronunciation, the clue is in the name there. It's not an accent that is particular to a region of England or in the UK. It's one that is given to somebody. They have to study for it, and usually because they're aiming to be a politician, or they're aiming to be a newsreader or something like that. If you think that when you're learning RP you're learning to speak more like a native speaker, well, just bear that in mind, that RP is not actually like a native accent. There's no city or region where you could go to where everybody speaks RP. In fact, you might even be surprised to learn that only 3% of the population of the UK actually speaks RP. And these tend to be a small percentage of the elite and the upper classes and so on. The consideration with this accent is that you're not likely to ever encounter this in your day-to-day life, right? Unless you're going for tea and biscuits regularly at Buckingham Palace with the Queen. My question to you would be, who are you trying to impress, right? If you want to become a politician in the UK, then by all means go ahead and learn to speak in received pronunciation. There are some benefits to RP. The first one probably being the sheer wealth of information that's out there about it. If you pick up an English textbook at a lower level, the chances are that the accent and the pronunciation models used in that book are going to be in RP, simply because it's like the standard accent, right? But of course, when you get up into the higher levels, and I've heard this a lot from my students as well, you're going to find that, wait a minute, I've been lied to. The English in this book is nothing like what they're doing out there on the street, right? So if I go out there and speak with people, why is it nothing like the textbook? Well, the answer is, again, because 97% of people are speaking something else. Just bear that in mind. Another benefit of RP is that it does get us in the ballpark when we're at a low level. A key feature of received pronunciation, and indeed the reason why politicians and newsreaders use it a lot, is because it forces the speaker to enunciate and pronounce their words properly. So when you're at a low level as an English speaker, and you've got a low listening level, it can be nice to be able to understand every single word in a listening exercise. It helps you to build confidence. But when we move into the upper reaches, or if we're going to be interacting with lots of people out and about at social events and so on, RP is maybe not the best way forward. The next accent that I want to add to the list is the BBC accent, which is basically the same as RP, or at least it was in the past. And if you said to somebody a BBC accent, they would have been referring to received pronunciation. But it's important to add this to the list, because when a lot of people speak about the BBC, they assume that everybody on the BBC speaks with this received pronunciation. Today, this may or may not be the case. A lot of news readers on the national news will do, for example. But as today we have a lot more TV channels available than we did in the past, it's quite common now to see a range of accents on the BBC. So just be aware of that. The other thing you might want to consider is that if you're using the BBC as like your shining beacon of accent goodness, and you're only watching material from the BBC, which I know a lot of students do, you might not be getting exposure to a wide range of accents. The consideration here would be, well, do you want to be a newsreader, really? The benefit of learning to speak like somebody on the BBC is that you at least know that you're going to be understood by the majority of people in the UK, but the same thing would apply as applies with RP, which is, do you really need to speak in an accent which only applies to 3% of the population? You don't need to sound like a BBC newsreader unless you really want to. Another consideration would be, are you spending all of your time on materials from the BBC simply because you're most comfortable with it, right? Because obviously, because they're enunciating all of their words clearly, you need to understand that that's not what you're going to encounter most of the time. So if you're studying for an exam, or if you're going to move to the UK and be interacting with people from different areas of the different regions of the UK, then the BBC maybe isn't going to prepare you for that situation. The next option on our list of accents would be a regional accent. So this could be, maybe you decide you want to learn American English or British English or Australian, so on. But still, that's not exactly clear cut, because if you say that you want to have a British English accent, I would ask you, which one do you want to have? Do you want to learn English from Manchester? Do you want to learn a Liverpool accent? a London accent or even a Yorkshire accent. As I've already mentioned, if you travel 15 minutes on the train in any direction, you will get a different accent. Between these accents, of course, they are mutually intelligible. If I get on that train and get off at the other end, people are still going to understand me because all of our accents have common features that make it easy for us to understand one another. But there are some striking features of each accent that would identify a person as coming from that place. If you're unsure at all about what I'm saying, I suggest you go and check out 4 of the most famous programs from the UK, which people here watch all the time: Coronation Street, Hollyoaks, EastEnders, and Emmerdale. And in watching those programs, you will hear accents from those 4 different places. In the US, moving from one state to another, you will encounter similar differences in accents. If you're going to be moving abroad to a particular country, if you're moving to the US to study, for example, then it might be worth your time focusing on American English. If you're coming here to study in a particular city in the UK or to work, then you might want to learn the regional variation from the city that you're going to be moving to. A couple of years ago, the actor Christian Bale accepted his award at the Golden Globes, and when he received his award, he gave his acceptance speech in his native Welsh accent, and a lot of people were shocked because he was most known for playing American characters, perhaps, in movies such as Batman and American Psycho, and a lot of people didn't realise that was his accent because he'd covered it up so well to play those characters. If you're an actor, or if you're performing a character on the stage, this might be the best option for you. So your main considerations before choosing to work on a regional accent then might be, well, if you're not an actor, then where are you planning to live? Or even which country are you closest to? Another thing you might have to think about is, does my exam that I'm applying for require a particular accent? I've been teaching for IELTS for some time, and on that exam they don't require you to have any particular accent, but you can, as long as you are consistent in the features that you use. So it's quite alright, for example, to say combine elements of an American accent with a British accent. That might not be the case on your exam, so check it out. Another thing would be, are you mostly going to be speaking in English with people from your own country, or are you most likely to be speaking with locals from a particular region? If you spend most of your time working in an international company and most of the English speakers that you meet are, say, from China, then maybe it doesn't make so much sense for you to invest a whole load of time into learning to speak like a native speaker from Sheffield, for example. It just wouldn't make much sense unless you're particularly passionate about it. Another option, and one you might not have even considered at this stage, is you could keep your original accent, or at least keep some aspects of your native accent. Some people feel that their native accent is a big part of their personality, or a part of where they're from, and they can't ever imagine speaking with an American accent or a British accent. But if you think that your accent that you have at the moment is a strong part of you and you feel very attached to it, or maybe everybody tells you that you've got a sexy accent or whatever, then that's absolutely fine. If you want to keep it, then go ahead. What we're doing today is just looking at the options that we have. We want that you're keeping your native accent for that reason, because you love it, and not because you feel that you have to. The considerations with keeping your original accent would be, don't keep it for the wrong reasons, right? And this would be like if you have, say, you're scared of you've got imposter syndrome, and this means that you're worried that people will say, hey, you're not from the US, or you're not from the UK, why do you speak with that fake accent? Maybe you feel nervous about expressing yourself in this new way that you've not done before. You've got so used to speaking English in the way that you do at the moment that you can't imagine speaking like a native speaker or speaking with a clearer accent. You might even find yourself criticizing native speakers and saying things like, no abres la boca lo suficiente, para qué hablas con la boca tan cerrado así? And the problem with that is, it's like you're trying to fix England, or you're trying to fix the United States, and that's that's not right. You have to adjust your English to ours in order to bridge that gap if you want to speak more clearly. You can't expect the entirety of England to change their English to speak like you, because it's just simply not going to happen. Another reason why we might get stuck with our native accent is if we've been studying for a long time and we've studied hard and we find we haven't made as much progress as we would have liked, and then we start to tell ourselves that this is just impossible for me. I could never speak with a clearer accent. And this is simply not true. It's just mind over matter. You are as capable of producing a clear English accent as anybody else. So the main consideration with keeping your native accent is, of course, that it's going to make you stand out, for better or for worse. So you might find that in some situations you encounter discrimination because of your accent. If, for example, if you're applying for a job, then that might be a situation where you might prefer to have a more neutral sounding accent. Or if you're prepared to run with it and you can deal with other people's opinions, then that's fine. But overall, even if you do decide to keep your native speaker accent, you're still going to want to work to reduce some of the stronger aspects of that accent in order to increase your intelligibility. We want to make sure that the biggest portion of people can understand what it is that you're trying to say. The next option on the list is to speak with what we could call a hybrid accent. In other words, we pick and choose the elements of the various accents that are available, and we build our own version of an English accent based on the things that we like the most. The reason we might do this would be we're going for what is most effective and what can help us to reach our communication objective in the shortest amount of time possible. In other words, we want to go for what will help us to be easy to understand for most people most of the time, but also what will help us to improve our listening so that we can understand most of what we hear from most people most of the time. We would do this by maybe working on the sounds from our native language that are causing the most trouble or the most interference with our English, right? We get certain sounds mixed up as Spanish speakers. You'd also want to know which sounds of English are the most important in order to speak English clearly. Now, this might not be as many sounds as you think. What we're doing here essentially is only focusing on the most relevant sounds in our English in order to be understood most of the time. The people who this accent might be the most useful for would be people who are, say, going to be traveling around a lot or speaking with non-native speakers most of the time, or people who are going to be working in an international company. Right? You don't need to be able to produce all of the sounds of English. Our goal is to be able to communicate with most speakers. So it's not so important for us to sound like a BBC News reader or a native speaker or so on. The considerations for having a hybrid accent then would be, well, who do you need to speak to first and foremost? Am I mostly speaking with native speakers? Am I speaking with non-native speakers? Secondly, I might ask you, am I going to be staying in one place or am I going to be moving around? Another consideration would be, how much time do I have? A lot of people that say they want to speak like a native speaker, nothing wrong with that, might be the same people that are 2 months down the line complaining that they don't have time, right? It takes more time to speak like a native speaker than it does to speak clear English that is understood by most people, simply because you're focusing on less sounds. Having a hybrid accent is perhaps the most realistic, in that you don't have to master all of the features of English. It saves you time, and you can connect the sounds that you're going to learn with your objective. So all of this leads me back to my first question, which is, which of these accents should I choose? Which one should I focus on in the months ahead? And the answer is, it really depends on what your objective is in your English. Do you really need to speak a native? Is that important to you? Are you passionate about it? Do you have the time to invest to get there? Is it necessary for you? I mean, sometimes we like the idea of something, but in reality we don't have the time or resources to invest in actually getting there. Also, who are you mostly going to be speaking with? mostly native speakers in the UK or in the US, or are you not going to be interacting with native speakers at all? Perhaps you're going to be speaking with people from a variety of different countries which are not native English speaking countries. As you move up to an advanced level of English, you also need to understand that for the purpose of listening, you want to be familiar with the common features that exist in all of these different accents in order to be able to understand most of what you hear. You'll also, to reach an advanced level, need to have an understanding of some of the smaller differences that set these accents apart, and these include things like the Scottish R, or the glottal stop in English from Yorkshire. Betty got a bit of better butter. Or the American R, or the way that they pronounce two T's in the middle of a word as a D, and things like that, because these are things that you're gonna encounter as you listen to different materials. We've talked about 5 different kinds of accent that you could aim for. That is the RP accent, that is the BBC accent, regional accents, the Spanish speaking accent, so you retain elements of your own native language, or a hybrid accent. Question of the day for today is, which of these accents are you now gonna aim for in your English learning? Which of these will you pay the most attention to? Put your answers in the comments below this video. My name's Rob, and here on METR we're all about helping Spanish speaking English learners take their English from an intermediate up to an advanced level. If that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, hit that subscribe button, click the little bell icon, and then you'll get notifications every time I upload new content. We've got a lot of new material coming this year. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.